Hello there, and welcome back. In today's video, I am going to be boring you to death. So you will be falling asleep pretty fast to this video because I'm going to be talking about the most boring thing I can think of: work. I'm going to be taking you through my day-to-day work life and what happens to me at work on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to be walking you through every single step of my working day. That's pretty boring. You're going to fall asleep in that time. So without further ado, let's just get started. So a typical workday for me usually starts at around 5 a.m. That's when I wake up. From there, I take a shower, I eat breakfast, and I get ready. I usually leave the house at around 6:30, maybe a little bit before, and then I get to work by 7. Now, for those of you who don't know what I do, I am an HVAC apprentice, almost a technician now. I am certified, and basically I'm an installer, so I install furnaces and ACs almost every single day. So usually I show up at the shop at around, and like I said, 7 a.m. From there, there's a guy I work with every day, who's been a technician for over a decade, and we restock his van in the morning. Any trash that was left over from the previous day, we'll unload that, get all the scrap metal out of there, etc. Make sure the van's all stocked up for the job. We'll load up the equipment that we need, and then we'll dispatch to the job. When we get to the job, which we do mostly residential, so we're usually just at people's just residential houses, and we place those systems. Sometimes we do commercial, but not so often at my company. We're mostly residential. So when we get to the job, we will first check in, tell the people that we're there, and ask them to show us where the equipment is. So they'll show us where the furnace is in their house, and they'll show us where in their house the AC is, if that's what we're doing, which is, like I said, typical. From there, we'll also ask where their breaker is, so we can turn off the electricity to their furnace. You don't really have to do it with the air conditioner because the air conditioners have a disconnect on the outside, so you can just pull that on the outside without having to flip a breaker off, and it shuts off power to the air conditioner. So usually I start on the inside of the house with the furnace, ripping the furnace and coil out, and the guy I work with usually starts on the outside, getting the AC out. So what that entails is, for the AC, is you have to hook up gauges and a recovery pump to and a recovery tank to recover the refrigerant in the system into the tank, because you can't just release that stuff into the atmosphere. It's not good for it. A single molecule of chlorine can kill 100,000 molecules of oxygen, or well, not kill, but it turns 100,000 molecules of oxygen in our atmosphere into a different chemical. So hook that up, you gotta wait for that to recover all the refrigerant out of the system because it pulls it out, and then you gotta disconnect the line voltage and low voltage from the AC. And then you're just waiting for it to recover. On the inside, what you do first is you flip off the breaker to the furnace to get that line voltage. You stop that so you don't get electrocuted. And usually I like to start with the gas, so you'll shut off the gas to the furnace. There's usually, not to the house, to the furnace. There's usually a shut-off valve. And from there you can take the union off, which connects the gas. And then you can take the gas out of the furnace. And from there, I usually like to do the low volt wire that's hooked from the thermostat and the AC to the furnace. And then I like to do the line voltage, which is usually a switch on the side of the furnace. Take that out. Cut the drain, which depends on if it's an 80 or a 90%er. If it's a 90%er, the furnace also has a drain. If it's an 80%er, only the AC coil will have a drain. So I'll get rid of that. And then it's the matter of the flue, which I'll usually do last if it's a 90%er, because it's a little bit more difficult. Because with a 90%er furnace, which is the efficiency, it is PVC pipe, exhaust, and intake. With an 80%er, it's just an exhaust, and it's metal pipe. So I'll take that off, and then I'll get any screws that hold this to the return drop, which is what it's the metal ductwork that connects to your furnace that brings in the air. And then I'll take out the screws from the plenum, which is the supply, which is what the furnace, the blower motor, pushes the air into this metal ductwork and disperses it through your entire house. So I'll get all the screws out of that, and then from there I'm just waiting on this refrigerant to recover. And once that refrigerant is recovered, I can cut the copper line that connects the AC coil to the AC outside, which is we call it a condenser. I know a lot of this you're not gonna be able to picture this or anything, but that's kind of the point of this video. You don't have to understand it. This is to make you relax. It's boring. It's work. From there is the worst part of my day, and that is carrying the old equipment out and carrying the new equipment inside, because this stuff is not light, it's heavy. So that's always the worst part of my day, because I feel like I'm killing my back doing it, carrying these furnaces up these basement stairs and outside, and it takes two people to do it. And after we get the new equipment in, usually we switch off, but sometimes I'll be on the outside setting the AC first, and sometimes I'll be on the inside doing the furnace, but we'll go through both. Let's start with the AC because it's a little bit more simple. Let's start with the AC. So usually if the AC is on brackets, we'll just leave it the way it is because it's usually already level. But if it's not, we'll throw down some gravel and we'll level out the ground a little bit. And then we'll throw a pad on there, a plastic pad. And then we'll throw the new AC on there, in which then we will connect the old copper lines to the ports on this new air conditioner, and then we will braze it in, which brazing is kind of like welding in a way. You have a torch and you have a stick of metal, and with brazing it's like I said, it's like welding and soldering in a way, but this torch goes up to it goes over 840 degrees Fahrenheit compared to soldering, which is under 840 degrees. So you'll heat it up, this copper, and then you'll just, with the metal, you'll melt the metal onto there and seal up any of the gaps around the copper to keep the refrigerant in. So once that's done, you pretty much have to focus on the furnace then. So I'll take you through that then. So with the furnace, you have to cut out a hole in the side to connect the return and the filter to. Sometimes the furnaces, you have to put return boxes on them to add a little height to them and to get a little more airflow coming into it. Especially with some of these newer units, they're just so efficient that they need it. I think it's anything over 75,000 BTUs. You need a return box on them now, but from there I like to start with, if the metal doesn't line up, which a lot of the times they don't, I'll make the plenum connect to the old one. Well, hold on, let me backtrack a little bit. Before then, we're gonna connect the return drop to the furnace and get it in place. From there, we're going to caulk around the top of the furnace, and we're going to put the new coil on top of that. Then from there, I will connect the top of the coil to the supply. Sometimes it lines up, most of the time it doesn't, so we keep a roll of metal on our van, and I will usually make the plenum, which is what they call it. That usually takes a little bit of time because you're bending metal and measuring it and have to make all four sides, and sometimes it's not just like a perfect square, which I wish it was every time, but sometimes it's angled and bent in weird ways that you have to kind of work around, but that takes some time. So once that's done and we know it's in place, then you can get everything else and start installing it like that. So I'll usually do line voltage first because it's pretty simple. You just hook up your ground, your neutral, and your 120 volts to the furnace. Give it power. And then I'll do low voltage from the thermostat, so the low volt and the AC. So usually standard, it's anywhere from 4 to 8 wires, depending on the thermostat and what else they have, but usually it's red wire to R for 24 volt power, green wire to G, which is the fan, yellow wire to Y, which is AC, and then white wire to W, which is your heat. You can also have other wires in there, like W2, which is 2-stage heating, Y2, 2-stage cooling, C, which is common, which you need sometimes if you don't want to power your thermostat with batteries and you just want it on with 24 volts. O for reversing valve, etc. That's usually with heat pumps, which is something else entirely. But anyway, I'll get that hooked up, and then I'll hook up the AC wire from outside, which usually it's just 2 wire if it's not 2-stage, which you hook that up to Y and C. From there, I'll usually do the gas to the furnace and connect that back in. After the gas is hooked up, you have to make sure that you bleed the gas a little, so when you're going to connect that last union, you have to open the gas that you shut off earlier and bleed some of that oxygen out of those lines. Only like a couple seconds, get it out of there, and then you'll tighten it up and make sure you'll hear if you have any leaks, but that's kind of you'll tighten up that union really good to make sure you have no leaks, but because that's the last thing you want is a gas leak. From there, I'll usually do the flue. It's pretty simple. PVC pipe, just prime and glue it. And then with an 80%er, you have metal pipe, which I like doing because it's even easier. But with the metal pipe, you have to make sure it's 26 gauge pipe, which is a little bit thicker. Some people use 30 gauge, and what that does is eventually, after years of use, it'll eat away at that pipe. Because I've taken out furnaces that have used, where people have installed 30 gauge on the exhaust flue, and it's just, there's either holes in it, or you touch it and it's just cracking in half and crumbling, and that's not good, because you don't want exhaust flowing throughout your house, because that's permanent sleep juice right there. Permanent sleep gas, should I say, because that stuff will kill you. So you don't want that. You wanna use 26 gauge, like a good technician, and make sure no one's going to die. Yeah, that's self-explanatory. From there, I'll do the drain, and then I will hook up the copper lines that we cut earlier to the coil, and we'll braze that in too. From there, we have to go outside, and we have to hook up nitrogen to the system and pressure test. What this entails is that we are sending nitrogen through the system of those copper lines and making sure everything that we brazed does not have any leaks in it, because the last thing you want is refrigerant to be leaking out of your system, because then it's not going to cool properly, and you don't want that. So we usually pressure test to anywhere from 300 psi to 350 psi. Make sure that holds for a good couple minutes. If it does, we release it. Then we hook up what's called a vacuum pump. So what this vacuum pump is it will pull a vacuum on these copper lines and pull all the non-condensables, which is anything that could affect the flow of the refrigerant, out of the system. And you'll hook up a micron gauge to this, and it'll tell you the microns. You want to aim for 500 microns or below. Usually it's below. Make sure you got a good vacuum on that system, and that nothing's going to interrupt the flow. Alright, from there, we will hook up your line voltage to the AC, which is usually, like I said, it's 2 legs of power and a ground wire. And then you'll hook up your low volt wires. And then from there, you're good to start up. So go to the thermostat, and sometimes we'll replace the thermostat, but I'm trying to keep this, I'm not trying to go into all the details, but we'll replace the thermostat with something new or whatever. It's not that important. We'll start up, we'll usually do heat first. Most of the time when you're starting up heat, because of how these systems are stored, they have these like factory preservative oils on the heat exchangers or whatever. It gives off this smoky smell the first time, and over half the time it sets off people's smoke detectors. So a lot of the time people think their house is on fire, so we usually tell them beforehand when we're doing this. And then once we see that everything's running pretty good for a while, we take temperature drop and we measure gas pressure and all that. We'll then go and do AC startup. So we'll switch the thermostat to cooling, we'll set it to a good temperature, and we'll let it run for about 15 minutes. And then from there we have to hook up gauges and make sure that it is properly charged. Now, most ACs come pre-charged with 15 feet of refrigerant, so sometimes you have to add a little bit more refrigerant to the system and get it properly charged. Sometimes you have to take some out. But once that's done, that's pretty much the day. We go back, load up the equipment into our vehicles, go back to the shop, unload, or sometimes if we're, it's a late day, we'll just go home and unload in the next day. But my day usually ends at around 5:30. So yeah, I usually, because right now I'm working 4 days a week, 10-hour days, 4 10s, because these full change outs take anywhere from, they could take anywhere from like 6 hours if they're really, really simple to, we've had some that take 12 hours, if they're really difficult. But yeah, that's usually my typical workday right there. So hopefully that was boring and kind of like me saying a different language, saying this stuff, and I just hope you're asleep now. Anyway, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, because I appreciate it very much. And I will see you all in the next video. Good night.